Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. How are you today?
We hope everyone is surviving the storm if you are out there. And if you are somewhere that is not impacted by Stella, thank you for joining us because it's probably very early there.
Exactly.
I'm going to, just a couple of logistical details before we get started. I'm going to go ahead and put everyone's lines on mute, but you can take yourself off mute at any point in time if you have a question or anything like that. And we'll also be womaning the chat from throughout the day. So if there are questions or anything as we go through it, feel free to speak up using the chat feature or just shout it out. And we definitely love to hear from you. So thank you again for joining us, and good morning. My name's Jennifer Manuel.
And I'm Regina Huber.
And we're excited to, despite the storm, be bringing you a talk called Carpe the Chaos and Closing the Gender Pay Gap. We've tried to make this session as interactive as possible, so throughout you'll have the opportunity to participate in polls and some really interactive dialogue and opportunities for that. So we encourage everyone who's on the line, keep your phone handy too, because we will be having a couple of polls where we use texting. Since none of us part with our phones, that shouldn't be too difficult. And we're excited to get started. So I think we're going to dive right in.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
At my company, women constantly work from home. I wonder what that means. That's what a male employee in the US said.
And a business mogul in Cameroon decided to share, so what if she gives birth every year, allowing her an annual 3-month-long maternity leave, during which she earns for no work? You as the male colleague working hard to earn a salary, your female colleague is paid freely just for bearing a child? Doesn't seem fair.
The quantity and quality produced by women is less, and the cost of employing them is higher. So it follows they will earn less. If you employ women and your competitors employ men, you will be outcompeted and out of business, according to a male employee in Australia.
This one might sound familiar. One of our Polish politicians decided to share that women must earn less than men because they're weaker, smaller, and less intelligent. Love that one.
And somebody posted in India, men work 12 hours, earn 10K as salary. Women meet lawyer for 2 hours, file maintenance case, get 10K per month.
The reason we wanted to share all of these quotes with you is that they're probably something you're already familiar with, is dealing with the institutionalization of the gender pay gap and of biases against women. This isn't a new topic. This is something that we are all very familiar with. Even as early as yesterday, seeing the UN start the day with 4 men in a row to start the UN Women's Commission on the Status of Women. That in and of itself is telling. These are all things that we're very familiar with. So we wanted to highlight some of those as we started to give you a sense of the perspectives, the global perspectives around the world. And as we work through today, give you some perspectives on what we can do to carpe the chaos and to help close that gender pay gap as we move towards gender parity in our world. We want to take a moment to introduce ourselves. We've had a few other folks who have joined the line. My name is Jennifer Manuel. I am the founder of VIA Consulting Group. We are a boutique organization helping women through their most challenging career transitions. I'm known as a diversity thought leader and a women's advocate, and I have been a TEDx Changemaker Fellow since 2015 and an executive coach. And my claim to fame is that I have worked in 14 countries in 4 years, in the work that I have done. And my moment when I feel most powerful is when I can take global concepts and bring them to the hyper-local, even neighborhood level communities. Good morning.
And hi, I'm Regina Huber. I'm the CEO and founder of Transform Your Performance. I'm a transformational leadership coach. I like to think of myself as a power shifter for my clients. And I am a speaker with a huge passion for dance and author of Speak Up, Stand Out, and Shine. And I've lived and worked in leadership positions in 6 countries on 3 continents, and I've also led training initiatives in projects throughout Europe and Latin America. And what I stand for is inclusive diversity, freedom, and co-creation, so we can all enjoy greater wealth and more peace together.
Love it.
And we both have quite different stories, although we've both worked internationally, but our stories are very different. And what brought us together today is that we are both leadership ambassadors of Take the Lead Women. So Take the Lead Women is an organization founded by Gloria Feld and Amy Litzenberger. And we at Take the Lead inspire and prepare women to take their fair and equal share of leadership across all sectors by 2025, rather than 2095, as predicted by the World Economic Forum. Take the Lead is a big part of today's women's movement. And today what we are seeing is that individual organizations are coming together in a larger network. And what Take the Lead brings to the table is a unique and new approach on power. And we're going to see more of that in a little bit. So as we move along in the session, feel free to tweet. And as you do, please use the hashtags CSW61, Carpe the Chaos, and Gender Pay Gap. And remember to tag us as well, so we can retweet your tweets and send them out all over the world. So we're curious, where are you all from? What countries do we have in the room today with us?
And if you want to take a moment and pull up the chat box, we'd love to see, hey, we have someone coming in from Puerto Rico. All right, someone here in New York.
Okay.
With the storm.
More New Yorkers.
A very snowy Boston.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I heard that was the worst part so far. LA.
Very good. A lot of New Yorkers in the house.
Okay, I know we have Canada. Okay, Cassandra. Yay.
Excellent.
And I'm sure we have many more.
Yeah, it looks like we have a lot more on the line. So as folks continue to trickle in, please share where you're from, where you're joining us from. And we know that this is a globally relevant topic. So one of the things that we really want to look at is, and that we're curious about is how many of us can raise our hands and say that we know that the organizations that we work for or represent or work with as clients pay men and women equally. I think if we were all sitting in a room, we wouldn't have very many hands raised. And that's part of what we want to talk about here today. Many of us on this call know some of the demographics of that we're going to present on some women's power facts. And we wanted to provide you with a highlight from a globally focused perspective of some of the metrics and share actually some original research that's been done on the composition of women in the global Fortune 500. So basically, it's about a 50-50 split of the global population. Women comprise 49.6% of the global population. When we look at the World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap Report that was released last year, there are some countries that rank especially high in the global gender gap. And A few of those are listed here. And there are some that are at the lower end of the ranking, and we have some of those here. The thing worth noting for this is that while there are countries that rank high and there are countries that rank low, everyone has a gap to close. So regardless of whether you hail from one of the countries that does happen to have a higher ranking, or if you're in one of the lower quartiles, everyone has some work, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the drivers behind the global pay gap in a bit. Everyone, no matter where we hail from, has work to close the gender pay gap. So no one's there yet. And our goal, one of the things we talk about with Take the Lead, is the goal of 25, not 95. So the dedication to closing the gender pay gap by 2025 instead of 2095, or later in many cases, as we'll see in a little bit. One of the abysmal statistics that we have seen is that only 2.4% of global Fortune 500 CEOs are women. And this is actually regressing. So in 2013, there were 17 of the global Fortune 500 CEOs that were women. In 2014, it was 13, and by 2016, it was 12. So in many cases, we are actually looking at less participation by women leading the largest organizations across the world. In addition, we see some of those same principles, and this is some of the research that my company, Be a Consulting Group, did, looking at the gender demographics of the board composition of those global Fortune 500 companies. And we see the same statistics hold up. Women only hold about 8.1% of the board seats across the largest organizations globally. And I think for those of us on this call, that's not a huge surprise. It is something that we're familiar with, but certainly shows that directionally we have a lot of work to do. And when we look at the larger group, the Global Fortune 1000, less than 3% of women, or 3% of the organizations have more than 40% women on their board. So we're talking about 28 out of 1,000 organizations, which again, pretty abysmal. And all of this, some of these statistics you're probably already familiar with, some of them may be new to you, but it makes the case for us that there's still so much work to be done, and why closing the gender pay gap and seeing, the composition of the global Fortune 500, 1000, and even in all of the businesses that we own and run, why these kinds of things are so important. There's a fantastic study, if you're not familiar with it, that the McKinsey Global Institute, MGI, released back in 2015 called The Power of Parity. And they do a fantastic job of outlining the trillions of dollars of impact that not having women as full participators in the workforce and in the economy is having on our economy, and the opportunity cost that is lost by the gender pay gap and some other factors. So there's a number of drivers, and I'll share some of them here on what we're looking at from some of the drivers of the gender pay gap. The important thing for us to note, it's not any one single thing. It's a combination of things. So we see everything from a driver's perspective, from political empowerment and political representation, where we see countries like Rwanda that have about 65% of their of women their elected officials are women. So looking at some countries that rank really high on this and others that are significantly lagging behind. We look at economic opportunity and participation, women's ability to participate in the economy, to participate in the workforce, looking at education level and unpaid care work. This is a huge focal area for this year's Commission on the Status of Women is shifting some of that unpaid care work throughout the family and sharing it in a larger context. So it's not any one of these drivers individually, but they're all levers that we can push to be able to, in an intersected way, drive towards closing the gender pay gap. So here's a fun test. How old will you be when we achieve gender parity? This is my favorite one. So I picked on my friend Regina to start.
I'm a little older than her, so.
My lovely friend Regina over here, who hails from Germany. We put Regina's birthday through a really neat tool that the World Economic Forum has. It's called the Gender Gap Calculator. There's a link to it at the bottom if you're interested. I encourage you to all check it out. You put in your birthday, the country that you hail from, and it spits out a number, and it's not a pretty number. So I'd love to invite everyone to join us and say, how old do you think Regina is going to be when we achieve gender parity globally? Type in your answer in the comment box. Any guesses?
And it's not 64.
Oh. 134. We have our first guess. Not too bad.
Yeah, not so bad.
I think you might make it.
Yeah, I'm determined to. That's definitely an age I want to reach.
Great question from Tabby. Is this our hopeful answer or the trajectory we're currently on? It is the trajectory that we are currently on.
Yeah.
Don't say 2000. 135. Okay. 172.
It's getting warmer.
Yes. Getting warmer. So our poor friend Regina is going to be 222 years old.
Pretty number.
When Germany closes the gender pay gap.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Yeah. Not so optimistic. And for myself, have to pick on myself. Yeah. The oh no comment. Yes, absolutely. For myself, I hail from California, here in the US. Any guesses for how old I would be now that we've seen?
Now take into account that she is quite a bit younger.
Not that much. 202. You're so close.
Okay, you won the prize.
I think Tabby's our winner there.
Okay.
205 years old. So why do we do this? And again, I will post the link in here, and that's something that we can follow up with. I know a few have mentioned that the video is covering the bottom there, so it's a little hard to see. But the only certainty that we all have is that that's where we're going to be if rates continue at the current trends. And that's part of what we want to talk about today is what are, again, some of the drivers and looking at that new power paradigm that Regina is going to share with us of how we can start to make these numbers in our lifetime phases. And there's a question from Susan that I want to take here for a moment. Susan asked, is the pay gap defined for every woman on the planet or just for those under an official retirement age or what? Susan, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So the pay gap is defined as the percentage that a woman earns compared to a male counterpart for doing the same type of work. So some of the standard numbers that we see around it is that women are paid 23 cents less, so 77 cents on the dollar to what men make for a comparable role. And there's some fantastic resources that we'd love to share with you that have come out of the Equal Means Equal movement and some of the UN women, women's work in this field. If we look specifically in the U.S., the 77 cents is a global number. However, there is even more discrepancy for women of color here in the U.S. So for Latina women and African American women, it's, let's see, 65 and 56 cents on the dollar compared to even their Caucasian counterparts. So again, a lot of work to do in this area, but that's generally when we talk about the pay gap, that is the discrepancy that we're describing. And related to that, it's actually a perfect segue. So thank you, Susan. Oh, and thank you, Rhea, for posting the link to the calculator. If you're interested, go ahead and it's there in the chat. Over the course of her lifetime, a typical woman working full-time in the US will lose over $431,000. So here's a quick Q&A for folks. With that money, could she buy a house? Could she put 2 kids through college at public school? Could she buy pretty much 22,000 gallons of gas? Or could she feed a family for 6.4 years? Any guesses on that?
Maybe just type in 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm going to give it to the first person who got it. The answer is all of the above. She could do all of those things. And again, we're looking at it, a typical woman. So this is averaged across the US. So some of our major markets, like sitting here in New York or in Los Angeles, a little bit difficult to buy a house with that little money. But across the whole of the US, an average woman will lose over $430,000 during the course of her career. And a reminder, this is from the gender pay gap alone. So this doesn't take into account any other factors, such as transitioning out of the workforce if she starts a family, or most of the unpaid care work or things like that falling on her plate. So again, this is the gender wage gap alone. So we wanted to take this research that we had done and look at it at a global level. So kind of the same question here, and a similar statement. Over the course of her life, a typical woman working full-time in Rwanda will lose over 10.5 million Rwandan francs from the gender pay gap alone. And with that money, she could buy a city center apartment, a new compact car, and feed a family for over 3 years. So again, it's taking some of these numbers that we know here in the US and looking at them in a global context, and really understanding what is the cost of doing nothing. If we continue at the same rates that we're going at now, what are the economic impacts of women to women and to the ecosystems that women are a part of by not being able to fully participate in the economy and by struggling every day with this gender pay gap. We see some great movements that happen usually in April around the acknowledgement that a woman would need to work until April of the following year to earn as much as her male counterparts earned in the prior year. So we wanted to give you this context kind of in a global context to say this isn't just an issue happening here in the US. This is an issue, the gender wage gap is something that's happening globally. And it's forcing, unfortunately, women to not be able to fully participate in the economies and communities that they are a part of. So what the heck does power have to do with the gender pay gap? And I love this quote from G.D. Anderson because I think it kind of nicely sums it up. Feminism isn't about making women stronger. Women are already strong. And I think this is something that we as women and their allies on this call know. We are already strong, but it's about changing the way that the world perceives that strength. And one of the things that I'm going to transition it over to Regina now to talk about a new kind of power concept and recognizing and perceiving that strength differently. We wanted to have a couple of polls for folks. So instead of in the chat, grab your phones, and we wanted to ask you, when you hear the word power, what is the first word that comes to mind? So you just need to text once to join, that 22333. Grab your phone. I see phones coming out on the video conference.
Yes. Hey.
And then text your message. And as we type them in, they will appear here. I'm going to share mine. Let's see.
Yes.
Oops,
so,
there we go. I'm going to clear this. Oops. There we go.
Influence we have. Strength. Yes, what else? What else? Keep it coming. Leadership. Wonderful. Money. Awesome.
Oh, a lot for leadership. That's great.
Wow, yeah.
I see a couple of folks still typing. Great. I think that's fantastic because it kind of gives us a sense of the first thing that we associate with power, that's very front and center for us. Mm-hmm. So the second question we have, and this will work very much in the same way. If I can move the slide forward, apologies. All right. There we go. So this one is on a scale of 1 to 10 on the power continuum. So we want to get a sense from the folks who are on the call here, your comfort level with power. So starting at 1, I'm not comfortable with the idea of power at all. It's not something I seek. All the way up to 10 is being comfortable with it and actively seeking it. 5 in the middle is kind of ambivalent, right?
Yeah. It's sort of, I don't know exactly.
So take a moment to respond and text your response in and see where we're at. I'm going to move this up so we can see your responses. All right.
We have several on 7. Put my glasses on. A 6, 3 8s so far. And a 10.
Someone's at a 10.
Awesome.
All right. That's fantastic. Great.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to close our poll here. And
Okay, so power unused is power useless. We love this quote, and we are seeing that many of you are quite comfortable around the concept of power. And that's really not surprising, because when we looked at the guest list, we thought that we would have a pretty power savvy crowd with us today, this morning. But not everybody is as comfortable around power as you are. So when we go into corporate groups with women and ask that same questions, that's not what we usually see. And we are sure that you also know some women who do not feel this comfortable when they hear power. And that's why we think there's a need to redefine power and to disrupt the current power paradigm. And the reason why so many women don't feel comfortable around the word power is because they think of power over others. That's the oppressive kind of power, where someone gives an order and someone else executes the order. That's not the power we mean at Take the Lead. At Take the Lead, what we mean is power to. And power to is the power to create, the power to achieve what we set out for, the power to implement our vision, and the power to attain our goals together with our teams, our business partners, our colleagues, our communities, and our clients. And I would like to look a little bit more at the specifics of power over and power to make it clearer what they really mean. When we look at power over, as I said before, it's the oppressive type of power. It's forceful. It's how we have seen power misused and abused over and over again in history, and how we're still seeing it. And that's the power we all rightfully resist. And power to, on the other hand, is, and I'm just going to fill this up real quick because we can't look into all the details. So power to is about personal agency. It's about creativity, teamwork. It's about collaborative leadership. And that's the kind of leadership that women tend to bring to the table. And it's the type of leadership we need more of in our corporations, in our governments, and in our communities. And we think that it's the type of power the world is crying out for at this time. So I also like to think of power over. We at Take the Lead like to think of power over as illusionary power, because it depends on others. So if I give an order to Jennifer here, and I put a gun to her head and I threaten her, if she does not comply with my order, if she doesn't execute that order, my power is lost. It's gone, it's zero. Power to, on the other hand, works quite differently. No one can take away my power to, because it's my inner power. And every single person on this call and every single person in the world has this inner power and this power to, and we must really never forget that. So today, we're going to look at the 9 leadership power tools to close the gender pay gap. And this power tool is at the base of these 9 leadership power tools that Gloria Felt came up with and that she also published in her book, No Excuses. And specifically, so these actionable 9 power tools fall into 3 categories: self-definitional, counterintuitive, and changing systems. And today we're going to look specifically at power tool number 5, Carpe, the chaos, within the context of closing the gender pay gap.
Yay.
Yay. And we've done a little bit of that already with the snowstorm and everything. So we have quite a lot of experience by now. Okay, yeah, let's move ahead. So that was me in a Carpe the chaos situation in the past. And I would like to ask you, what do you think of when you hear the word chaos? And let's use our fabulous tool again to get your ideas here. So what's the first word that comes to mind when you hear the word chaos? Type it in. Wow. Opportunity. Love that. Control. Uncertainty. Yeah. Well, I don't have my phone close by because it makes a lot of noise. But I would say, yeah. So one word that comes to my mind is also violence, actually. Loss, uncertainty. Yeah. Unsettling. Yes. Okay. Well, that's awesome that somebody said opportunity, and that's also how we think of chaos at Take the Lead. We like to look at it as an opportunity, and that resonates deeply with me because just about 7 years ago, I went through an extremely chaotic situation with a fraudulent business partner in Brazil, which cost me not only my business and a bunch of money, but also completely destroyed my confidence. And at the time, it was hard to see the opportunity in this situation. But there was a moment when I realized that I had to reconnect with my power too. And I had to take a step back and look at the situation and see the opportunity. And that's when I finally was able to clean up the mess and to start a new life and to move to New York, start a new business, and to use my power too to create something new. And that's why I love this quote from the I Ching. So in the I Ching, Chun translates to initial difficulty or initial chaos. And the symbol you see here is a blade of grass that's pushing up through the earth. And the earth in this case is the obstacle. So this blade of grass is generative. It's generating something new. It's bringing forth something new into the world. And that does not usually come without effort. Would you agree, Jen?
Absolutely.
I bet you also have a chaos story.
I do. Other than braving the snowstorm last night and carping the chaos to come to all of you today, my Carpe the chaos story goes back to a couple of years ago when I had recently been laid off and was trying to figure out what was going to come next in my life. And although it was a very tumultuous and uncertain moment, there are those moments you look back on in your life and you realize that you're pushing up into something greater, this same notion of the blade of grass pushing up. And it was at that moment when I decided it was time to start my own business and to be able to answer the call that I had always felt to serve women in the world. And in that transition, it was rocky, it was difficult, and it was something that took great effort. But in that pushing through, in that moment of being able to stand on my own 2 feet and now have a thriving business that's growing and bringing on other women and helping women through some of their most difficult transitions in their lives, and creating systems where that's possible. I feel like I've been born out of the chaos and into not certainty yet, but into a place that holds more promise. And it's an acknowledgement of the great difficulty that came before, but and very respectfully looking at that, but also kind of pushing ahead and having an eye on the future too.
Right.
So
I think we both wouldn't have been able to actually do what we do now if we hadn't grown through this entire experience. And that's the same for all of us on the call, I guess. So, yeah. So let's look at how some other women carpet the chaos. You carpet the chaos really well here. Now let's look at the Nordic women and the Nordic revolution. How did the women in Iceland respond to the financial crisis in 2008? Well, in 2008, Iceland suffered a financial crash of the worst kind. And today they're back on their feet. The entire country is blooming again. Why? Because women took over. When the three main banks collapsed in Iceland in October 2008, and the country went bust as a result, the ruling party was overwhelmingly male, and practically all the bankers were male as well. And their reckless, buccaneering business and banking practices bankrupted a country which up until then had been categorized as the best place to live on this planet. That changed drastically in 2008 because the foreign investors left the country. The currency, the Icelandic krona, fell by 50% in just a week. The stock exchange plummeted by 95%. Many companies went bankrupt, and as a result, unemployment levels hit record levels, and inflation soared as well. Then women took over. Women seized power, and they cleaned up the mess, and they fixed the country, basically. And they seized power where it mattered most, in government, in banking, and in business. The male prime minister was replaced by, and I'm going to do my best to pronounce her name, Jóhanna Sigurðardóttir. And she was the first female prime minister in Iceland. And some of the CEO seats that were left vacant by the departing male CEOs were also taken over by women, not only in banking, but also in insurance and in other sectors. And these women brought the feminine values to the table. Feminine values like sustainability and social responsibility. And what that meant is they also replaced the cliche that women in power had to think and act like men. Men were actually starting to listen to them because they saw the results, good results. Yeah. So at the time, we just talked about the feminine values. And at the time, there was one woman who did a TED Talk, or shortly after this time. And her name is Halla Tómasdóttir, and she's the co-founder of Outdoor Capital. So she did a TED Talk, and we would like to share a piece of that TED Talk today where she talks about those feminine values.
So be patient with me here while I get our TED Talk pulled up.
So for those of you who haven't seen the entire TED Talk, it's really worth watching. It's called The Feminine Response to Iceland's Financial Crash.
And we're queuing it up to one.
Okay. So it's 3:10.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Our values. So let me share with you our values. We believe in risk awareness. What does that mean? We believe that you should always understand the risks that you're taking, and we will not invest in things we don't understand. Not a complicated thing, but in 2007, it was at the height of the subprime and all the complicated financial structures, it was quite opposite to the reckless risk-taking behaviors that we saw in the market. We also believe in straight talking, telling it as it is, using simple language that people understand, telling people about the downsides as well as the potential upsides, and even telling the bad news that no one wants to utter, like our lack of belief in the sustainability of the Icelandic financial sector that already we had months before the collapse hit us. And although we do work in the financial sector, where Excel is king, we believe in emotional capital. And we believe that doing emotional due diligence is just as important as doing financial due diligence. It is actually people that make money and lose money, not Excel spreadsheets. Last but not least, we believe in profit with principles. We care how we make our profit. So while we want to make economic profit for ourselves and our customers, we are willing to do it with a long-term view. And we like to have a wider definition of profit than just the economic profit in the next quarter. So we like to see profits plus positive social and environmental benefits when we invest.
So I think we could probably listen to that all day. Oh, sure. Let me bring our talk back up here. Great. Yes.
Okay, I'm back. So think about this. What would the world look like if more countries and more governments adopted these principles of the feminine values that she just talked about, or as she also calls it, the female trend? Just imagine for a moment, wouldn't that be fantastic? And we both, our favorite is probably the straight talking. So yeah, just like really say it as it is, right? Although all of them are super important. And so one specific measure I wanted to also mention that's directly related to the gender pay gap and that Iceland adopted was a new approach on taxes and budgeting. And they call that the gendered budget making. And what it does, it looks at taxes and budgets, and it looks at how they affect men and women differently. How do they impact them differently? And how can we adjust them so we can increase gender equality? And that's not the only thing the Iceland government has been doing. They also offer quite generous parental leave and childcare provisions from the state. And to tie it back to the drivers that Jennifer mentioned earlier. So in Iceland, we have high political empowerment, female political empowerment. We have high participation of women in the economy, and not only at the lower levels, but also at the top levels. We have legal protection, and we have great access to education and many of the other drivers that we mentioned earlier. So that's how Iceland actually got to the top of the list of this report by the World Economic Forum. And that's why Iceland is currently way ahead of most countries in gender pay equality. And that's all really nice. But having said that, in Iceland, men still earn 14 to 18% more than women. So on International Women's Day, just a few days ago, the Icelandic government announced that they would make it mandatory for employers with over 25 staff to prove that they pay them equally, independent of gender, nationality, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. And they will apply this to both the public and private companies or sectors. The declared goal of this is to put an end to the gender pay gap by 2022. So someone's taking the lead there. Nice.
Excellent. One of the other examples that I'd love to share with you, as a former athlete, this is one of the stories that really resonates for me. is the story about the U.S. Women's national soccer team and their fight for equal pay. There have been numerous interviews and things of that nature from some of the key players. And actually, we had Abby Wambach here last night at UN Women and the Commission on the Status of Women, helping to kick off the some of the new initiatives that are happening in this place, sponsored by UN Women, around the gender pay gap. So she has become a figurehead for this movement. So to break down some of the numbers for you of the gender pay gap that still exists in the sporting world, and for key players, the goalkeepers for both the men's and women's U.S. soccer team. So for the men, it's Tim Howard, and for the women, it's Hope Solo. If you look at their pay side by side, it's not too far off. So Hope Solo's salary is about $323,000 back in 2015. And this was coming off of the women winning the World Cup. So that was a very exciting year for those of us who love soccer. And in that same year, her male counterpart, also a goalkeeper, Tim Howard, earned about $400,000. So if you look at it, not a huge discrepancy in their salaries. However, Tim Howard played 8 games and Hope Solo played 23. So I see a lot of faces on the video conference just shaking their head. Our reaction too. So when you break it down on the amount of time spent playing and the preparation and all of the things that went into all of this, you're looking at about a 3.1 times difference between Tim's salary and Hope's salary for the amount of time invested. And I love this one because I think it relates back so nicely as well to the notion of unpaid work as well. So when we see women who are being compensated for their work, and that notion, it ties very nicely into that as well. When we look at the overall, instead of just looking at individual players, when we look at the overall pool of dollars, the U.S. women's soccer team was just coming off a huge World Cup win. And their pool of money that they earned for doing so was a couple of $1 million. When we look at Regina's countrymen, at the German team that won, yay, that won the title in the year prior, it is 8.5 times what the women received as their bonus for winning the World Cup.
And I promise I didn't get any of it.
So we see these pay discrepancies playing out, not just in the organizations that we're a part of, but we see them playing out in a larger context. And the U.S. women, what I love that they did, they were coming off of this huge win of international fame and stardom and becoming household names around the world in the sport that is most played around the entire globe. And instead of sitting on their laurels and sitting back and saying, hey, didn't we do a great job? We just won the World Cup. We're fantastic. They started to fight. And they really, I think they're a great example of the Carpe, the chaos, because they really, instead of saying, oh, we did so great, they said, this is an opportunity to lean in and to raise awareness of the pay discrepancy for women. There are people who would argue that women, women's soccer players deserve to be paid less because nobody watches them as much. Well, not true. The women's viewership was right up there with the men's viewership around the world. Women, the caliber of soccer that they play isn't as competitive as men's. If you've ever seen these women play, we also know not true. And there's a fantastic article and video that I'd love to show you if it loads here. We were having problems loading it earlier. But it talks about how 4 of the women's national team players, so Alex Morgan, Becky Soderbrunn, Carly Lloyd, and Hope Solo, and then later joined by Abby Wambach, really started to talk about the equal pay and raising awareness of the pay discrepancies that exist in the professional sports arena, but also for kind of the yes, all women, also within their sport and within professional sports, but also extending to, the match of their lives, as they called it. So the women who are on the front lines of these conversations have said this has been just as difficult as the preparations and the things that they've had to make to play a professional sport at the caliber that they play at. And in some cases, even harder to overcome. So it doesn't look like the video is loading, but wanted to share their story with you because I think it's a perfect example of the Carpe, the chaos, and how when we look at their story and alongside the story of the women from Iceland, that there really are kind of some core themes that emerge.
Yeah. Absolutely. So there are 5 common components that we see in all these stories. And the first one is think positive. So the women all took the chance to think positive instead of giving in to resignation or frustration. And they saw the potential in the situation. They saw the opportunity to create change. They used different eyes. They used a different viewpoint. So for example, the women in Iceland brought in the feminine values, the female trend. And the women in soccer, the soccer ladies, what they did is they stood up against the US Soccer Federation, which for many years had been indoctrinating them to be grateful for the opportunity to play. Okay. So they also have been told, oh, you have a different salary structure. It's different. It's not, it's not comparable, which is really not true. It's just harder to compare. And then they seized the moment. They seized the moment to create change and to do something about it. They, for example, the women in Iceland, they stood up, they did some straight talking, right? So Hala did her TED Talk. They took over the seats that were left empty. They even founded their own companies that were aligned with these values. The soccer ladies, they also stood up and really stood up and seized the moment and took that opportunity when they had these concrete numbers from these very concrete situations from those World Cup wins. And they all took the lead. So the women in Iceland took the lead to lead the country into a better situation. They took all these different, they took all these different steps to fix the country and to make it a better place for everybody to live really again, just like it was in the past. Yes,
and
go ahead.
There's a question that came in from the chat of kind of sharing and recapping again what Iceland did on International Women's Day. It was a lot to take in of the different movements that they made. So do you want to recap that for us again?
So on International Women's Day, concretely, they announced so what's the name of that minister? It's Social Affairs and Equality, or Equality and Social Affairs. I can't quite remember the sequence here. But the minister announced that they would make it mandatory for any employers over 25 staff to prove that they pay their employees equally. And that's independent of gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and nationality. And this will be applied to both the private and public firms. So that's a very concrete announcement on International Women's Day, and the goal is to end the gender pay gap by 2022. The other measures had already been started before, actually. So they were the gender budget making, where they look at taxes and budgets and how they affect men and women differently, and to adjust these budgets and taxes accordingly. And they also had the very generous parental leave, they still have it, and childcare provisions and all these other things that help, right? And we tied it back to the drivers of the gender pay gap, which I believe actually from what we've seen from this story, we think that all of the drivers to close the gender pay gap are actually present in Iceland at this time, although it's still not super ideal, but they're working on it. And also the soccer ladies took the lead as well, because 5 of them stood up for the entire team. They filed a claim against the U.S. Soccer Federation, and they made it the game of their life. And they, as I said, they stood up for the entire team, but not only that, they publicly declared that this is in the name of all women. And I love that.
Perfect. We've talked a lot about power concepts, about the gender pay gap, and we know how big of an issue this is. So one of the things that we wanted to share is a series of steps with you in a call to action, really, to step forward of what we can each do at a personal level, at an organizational level within the organizations and companies or NGOs and groups that we represent, and within our own communities and in a communal setting. I think that's where we see women really, really thrive. So from a personal level, we'd like to invite you to have a conversation about power with a trusted friend, to think about the power concept that we shared here. And again, that's adapted from the Berkana Institute, which has some really fantastic resources on change. And we look at it within the context of power, moving from power over to power to, and letting this new power concept take shape. So having a conversation with a trusted friend about that, to really explore your own personal concepts of how you feel about power and how that concept resonates for you. That's really where it starts. And related to that, reflecting on your own experience with the gender pay gap. That was something that in my tenure with my company, that was something that I never could really raise my hand and say, I'm not sure, if this is happening. This is something that I need to explore. This might be, something that's happening that I've experienced, or maybe I haven't experienced, but I want to, know more and trust that that I'm being paid equitably. So I think, again, for all of us, it really starts at that personal level. The second piece is looking at this within the context of organizational systems. So taking this new power concept, and we are, again, more than happy to share these resources with you, of sharing this power concept within your organization. Find an opportunity to share it, whether that's at a team meeting, within your management structure, and the person who sits in the cubicle next to you, wherever that is, sharing this concept, and again, having a conversation and seeing how that resonates for people at the organizational level. And then when we think about the gender pay gap in this area specifically, encouraging your organization, I know not every organization can today take the steps that Iceland did of gender pay gap studies and things like that, but that is the goal, right? It is to bring about the systematic change within our organizations, and it starts when we start to shine a light on some of these things. So if you have the ability to start to measure your organization's commitment to the gender pay gap, or if you can be a voice that's in support of that, that's really the call to action here at an organizational level. And the last piece is communal. And I think this is a distinctly feminine notion is when, you know, all boats rise when we look at this from a communal perspective. So we encourage you within the groups that you're a part of, within your communities, your neighborhoods, your women's organizations, the groups where you stand as an ally for women, and for those who are marginalized. Host a conversation with your circle, with your tribe, with your people about this new power paradigm. Talk about it within these contexts and in these circles. And then kind of the second piece of that, the taking action piece on the gender pay gap, throw your support behind efforts to close the gender pay gap. Create your own group to mobilize and look at this at your local level. And that's really where a lot of the action and the traction really takes place. And there are phenomenal organizations out there. The UN Women and the Commission on the Status of Women are obviously two of them. We're proud to represent Take the Lead and its commitment to achieving gender parity by 2025. And there are so many organizations that we can become a part of and align ourselves with. And I think it recognizes that there really has been a movement and a convergence and a coalescence of so many different women's initiatives of late to really make positive strides in this direction. So those are some of the things that we wanted to share from kind of that personal, organizational, and communal level, where as a result of this initial conversation, we can go out into the world. And we want to complement that with an invitation to continue the conversation. We want to set up a couple of sessions for folks who would like to join us. And we're looking at next week at March 21st, and we have a couple of different times available depending on where in the world you are located. And we'd like to invite you, and we'll have an invitation to follow this, to continue to have a more global conversation. And given the kind of the shift that we needed to make to do this presentation virtually rather than in the room, we wanted to be able to continue those conversations and let some of this information percolate for a little bit, see how you respond to some of the power concepts and the information shared on the gender pay gap, and then invite you to a call to share your experiences and really talk about the efforts that you are involved with, that others are involved with, so we can raise our collective awareness of what everyone is working on as it relates to the gender pay gap and, again, to this new power paradigm that we talked about today. So keep an eye out for an invitation from us. We have a couple of sessions coming up that we're really excited to have you join us.
I would like just to add that we did see in the guest list that we had people from all over the world, really. Mm-hmm. So, for example, Rwanda, Egypt, right? So these are just two examples right now for the sake of time, but it was a quite diverse list in that sense. And we know we have a lot of people on here in this list also who are not on video that you cannot see, but they are certainly with us. So the more national and ethnic and the more diversity in general we have on those calls, the richer they will be. So we do want to encourage you to hop on the call. This is why we have created two different schedules and we've made it as simple and easy as possible. So we look forward to those.
So now that we've had a chance to reflect on this new notion of power and how we want to see how it resonates with you. So we'd like to ask you one last time for an updated poll. So given this new notion of power, where do you think you land? And I'm hoping that person who was a 10 is like a 22 by now, because we need it. Yes, we have somebody at our 10. And we have a 9, which I don't think we had before. So definitely seeing, we have a couple of people at 9, definitely seeing movement. And if you would like to chime in the chat box, and I'm going to unmute our lines as well here in a moment. If you would, wow, we are moving on the power continuum. That's nice. Exciting. If there are things that you would like to share of kind of how you've moved or things that really resonate for you about the new power concept, we'd love to hear those. So I'm going to unmute our line. Oops. Give me. There's a little bit of background noise. Would anyone like to share what their number was and what you moved from and to? We're always curious to kind of hear different stories about what resonates for folks.
I'll share. Hi.
Good morning.
Hi. Good morning. It's Tabby.
Hi, Tabby.
I started at an 8 and then I just moved myself up to a 9 because I found through your presentation hearing specifically about what the women in Iceland were able to accomplish and also what the soccer team, I've kind of paid attention to that from afar, but getting a little more close-up view through your story, Jen, of what they've been doing. I feel that when I hear about other women taking action, carping the chaos and stepping forward and being bold and challenging the systems, that encourages me and I can feel more power kind of infused throughout myself that, oh, wow, I can do that. And there's a sisterhood. It's always, the reminder. I feel more powerful when I know there's a sisterhood and other women willing to challenge the systems.
I think it goes back. Thank you for sharing first, Tabby. I really appreciate it. And I think it goes back to that notion of the need for a communal base for all of this, of that reference point back to other women, back to the activities that are happening in our neighborhoods and across the globe that really resonate with each of us. And that's where the magic happens, right?
And I would like just to add, it also depends on the women, what their children think. So when we see these women act like this and their children see them, so there's also hope in that, because it's not only the daughters, it's also the sons. I was a little disappointed yesterday as I went to the venue and a session just ended and there were all these women coming out of the session. There was not one single man, apart from the doorman. So when I see this, what can we do to also increase that share of men that are, and I know they're there. We just also sometimes they need a little encouragement, because I hear often from men who want to actually support us, they are not quite sure how to do that. So we also really need to include them a little bit more in the conversation. And that starts with our sons.
Yeah. And across the board with our allies.
Right.
So is there anyone else who I'm going to put a couple lines on mute here. Anyone else who likes to share where they moved from and to? We had someone in Colorado who was sharing with us. Was that Rachel?
Hello, yes, it's Rachel from Colorado. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. Thanks for joining us so early in the morning. That started at what, your time?
No, I'm really excited for these kind of conversations to take place. I'm leading a group here in Colorado of Latina leaders, and I'm very interested to find out and get resources for them on how to broaden their community from here locally on a national, even world scale. So this is really interesting. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, and we actually have one of our leadership ambassadors that take the lead, has a similar community here in New York. So it might be an interesting conversation for you to have with her. Her name is Yesi.
Oh, definitely.
Her name is Yesi Morillo. So if you send us an email to either, Jen or me, and we're gonna give you all the contact information at the end again, but then we'd certainly be happy to make that introduction as well, because I think she has a lot of experience already doing conferences and everything here.
That would be great. And regarding the topic that you're discussing, I mean, I think that I've kind of gone back and forth in some of these spaces. I feel that as I'm getting older and more experienced, I've increased my comfort level with power. And I would say that I'm probably, I mix between probably a 6 and an 8.
Mm-hmm. And what for you is what drives that difference for you? I'm curious.
I think that it's I've always been inspired and motivated by mentors and by other people that have helped me along the way. And I think that anytime I've had somebody believe in me and somebody who's taken the time to invest in me, and there's been an issue area that I'm really passionate about, it's increased my level of confidence. And I think getting to know the topic area better and being able to speak on it from a different viewpoint, or almost like an expertise viewpoint, has been helpful.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that actually resonates a lot with me. I just, in the book I published last year, I actually, in the dedication, I thanked everybody who ever believed in me, because we need these people in our lives, right? So it's really important for us all, but also specifically for us women, to have that person or support system. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. And when Regina was talking about the power concepts of moving from power over to power to, I think it's that awareness and recognition that there is this intersection so much between power and confidence, particularly for women. So as we make the move from a society that has been defined by power over to a power to, where it is much more personal in nature, but also that notion that Regina talked about, that it's not something that can be taken away. I think that, as we continue to redefine power for ourselves, we will see this transition in ourselves and in our communities to see the intersection of power and confidence being derived from an inward state, which I think is a beautiful and a very positive and a very powerful thing. Yeah. So thank you, Rachel, so much for sharing, and thanks for letting us pick on you for that. It looks like we have a couple more numbers coming in. Are there other folks who might be interested in sharing where they started and where they've moved to? We'll give folks a moment. Well, I'm impressed at the numbers that have come in. We're 8s and above. So I think that's great. And I think in the spirit of kind of carpeing chaos and seizing the moment, hopefully we can take this call, and tomorrow when we all recover from the blizzard, if we are here in New York and up and down the Eastern Seaboard, or, going back to that call to action and being able to have these conversations about power and the gender pay gap, internally with ourselves and the organizations and communities that we serve, and in our networks and tribes of women and allies, I think is fantastic. So at this point, we wanted to open it up for questions. And I'm going to go to the chat room first and see if there are specific questions that we can answer. Yes, Sasha, thanks for asking. Yes, we can absolutely share the information with the presentation with everyone. And yes, we will certainly follow up with that information and a link to today's call recording if that's something that you're interested in as well. So thank you, Sasha. Are there other questions from folks? If you want to type it into the chat, feel free to do that, and we can answer any questions there, or I'm going to unmute some of the line here and try and get rid of some of the background noise. Just a moment. Are there other questions?
And while we're not getting any questions, also if you have any ahas, any other ideas that you would like to share today, you know, coming from this conversation, we would love to hear about those too.
Abby, I'm going to pick up what was your biggest aha.
My biggest aha?
Yeah.
Transparency. I think I realized how important and almost mandatory transparency is in order to shift the gender pay gap. It's without that transparency, it feels almost impossible to make change. So it feels like the primary step within one's organization is to speak to the players who are, it's almost, it has to come from both directions. The grassroots direction, the employees to be transparent with each other about what they're earning in the greater effort to create equal pay, right? So everyone has to take that risk, and to be working from the top level down to build allies amongst those who are quote unquote in charge of being transparent.
Right, and in that, thank you so much for sharing that. That actually gives me an opportunity of something else I wanted to mention too, within this creating transparency concept. And it's, we have all these reports nowadays available, you know, the you mentioned earlier, but that's not the only one. There are several reports out there that we can share, and they have very compelling and convincing numbers that are relevant for the companies and for the economy. So it's really also about showing these numbers, because of course we have a certain interest. We want to create this, we want to put an end to the gender pay gap by 2025, but is this in the interest of everybody? Well, as soon as you make it interesting in terms of money, it becomes compelling to other people as well, to whom it might not have been so compelling otherwise, right? So I think it's also very important to share all these numbers of the trillions of dollars that we could generate if women were paid equally, and if they were participating in the economy at all the levels as men do. So there are a lot of numbers out there. I don't remember them all by heart, but you know, they're very, very compelling. And it's important to share them with the decision makers.
Yeah.
Is that something you think you could, in one of the follow-ups, send maybe a couple links to those resources for those of us who might not have immediate access? That would be wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I love the point that you make, certainly about, you know, the resources and becoming a community that can share those kinds of resources with another, but also going back to the point about taking risk, and that I think to start these difficult conversations, we need to understand that in order to make these large organizational commitments to doing things differently, to transparency, to closing the gender pay gap, that we need to bring along the allies and folks who may feel like they have something to lose when women gain. And I think those are the conversations that we can start to have as a group and as a community as we go out into the world and try and make these efforts. Is looking at, I love how Gloria Felt talks about this. It's an infinite pie concept, instead of wanting to make sure we each have our own little corner and piece of the pie that we have. So thank you for that, Tabby. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot. A question just came in from Sasha about organizing an ongoing series of these types of conversations around power dynamics, around the gender pay gap. Yes, absolutely. It's our hope that the 2 calls that we're hosting on the 21st will be the first of many, to be able to start to have these conversations, to share resources with one another, and to be able to bring these concepts, not only share them amongst ourselves, but to be able to take them out into the world as well. And to make sure that everyone who's on this call, who took the time out this morning to participate, feels supported throughout this process. I think that's one of the things that initially drew me to take the lead, and not just because of the work that I felt called to do for women in the world, but because it was such a great set of tools and resources and research, and a network of women who were also talking about those same tools and research and things that we had all seen. But it's a pretty comprehensive set of resources. So yes, absolutely, we will share. If others are interested, we will do a call out for folks to join us, and as we continue to have these conversations.
Yeah,
so
that'd be awesome.
And I know we're about 3 minutes shy of the top of the hour, but we have time for probably a couple more conversations before we close out for the morning and let everyone go get their sleds and get on with the day. All right. Well, in that spirit of what Sasha asked, if you're ready to talk about power, if you're ready to look and explore these new concepts, there's a million different ways to reach us. We encourage you to use one and all of them. And the last thing we would like to say is to wish you well, and to go forth and be awesomely powerful.
Yes.
Our contact information is there at the bottom. We'd love to encourage you to reach out to us and the leadership ambassadors all over the world from Take the Lead. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here this morning. We know it was a little bit rocky, but in the spirit of carpeing the chaos, and nevertheless she persisted, and all of those good things. We're really glad that we could be with you this morning and take the time to be together and to talk about things that we're so passionate about, that clearly there's a shared passion for with all of the folks that have joined us. So
yeah, exactly. So I would like to echo what Jennifer just said. It's been a huge pleasure to have this conversation with you this morning. And yes, we've gone through all these different challenges and have carpet the chaos together. You know, we've done it, you've done it, so you could be present this morning. So we appreciate that, and we appreciate your awesome questions and your participation. And we do hope that you also participate in future calls. Join us next week. It's a conversation that must not end today. And always remember that you have this inner power, this personal power of yours. And it's just a matter to connect with it, really. So no one can take it away from you.
So thank you again, and let's go forth and be awesomely powerful. Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Have a great day.
Have a great one.
Thanks. Share 1 moment.
Right.